In the third module of course 1300, we are going to discuss validation. In this section of the course, we learn how to differentiate between data validation at table level, form level, and the code level. However, part of this course, I only focus on the code level validation. And of course, we have a little bit of a discussion in regard to the table level and form level. Also, we learn how to use the built-in validation tools in Microsoft Access and also write our own code in order to validate the data. So let's get started with different types of validation. First, let's understand what is data validation to begin with. Validating the data means you're preventing the error from occurring. Means you want to make sure that the type of data that you're getting is exactly the type that you're expecting. So you could actually validate throughout the field type. For the sake of discussion, if you're expecting a date or time, you make sure that the syntax of the value is date and time. You could also validate through the field property, like by going through the field size, input mask, specifying a default value. If the user doesn't know the value, at least you can help them, give them a hint somehow, part of the design. And also talk about validation rule. Like for example, if the input mask fails, what kind of an action do you want to take? You might want to go and show a message box perhaps, which I'm going to demonstrate for you. And also whether or not somebody can enter a null value, like put nothing in it. You could specify the value is required. So validation levels are either table level, that can be set by the time you're creating a table, could be form level, that can be set throughout the form, events, modification, and manipulation, and finally code level validation, which you can actually call it from anywhere. Let's switch back here to our database, select a table, and just briefly, let's talk about the table level validation, which we talk about in course 1539, or Fundamental of Access 2000. If I click on New Table, let's go over the Design view, click OK. Let's go design our own table for the first time. I call ID to have a data type of type, for example, number, and then put like first name and last name as type of text. For the ID, I right-click on the table and set it as a primary key. Now on the ID number, as you see, there are a variety of different properties here for each field, one of which is input mask. The input mask property can be set also throughout the table and also can be set later on throughout the specific control validator. So if I select the input mask builder, automatically Microsoft asks me to save the table first. I call it, for example, my table. And then it says that the input mask wizard only works with text or date type field. Since this is a numerical value, it didn't let me to come up with the input mask. So let's go ahead and change this for a second to be a text, and then I can actually go back in here and choose the input mask property. Now the input mask wizard is going to happen, and they're going to tell me you can choose any of the following predefined masks that Microsoft has already defined. Let's say your ID could be your social security number. So this would be the mask. You can actually try it out, see how does it look like. As you see, you can put numerical value in this format. You can't even put text value, because even though I press the keyboard, you're not going to be able to enter the character in here, only numerical value. So this is some sort of a validation at the data entry level. There are a variety of other formats like phone number, zip code, extension, password, and many more. So this is one way in order to set the input mask validation. The other section is providing the default value for the user. So at least you could specify a default value so they can get an idea of what's going on. You could also combine input mask with the default value. On the validation rule, you could put your condition in there and say what kind of value do you accept. For the sake of discussion, on the case of, let's say, a numerical value, I can actually specify the validation rule. And I can click on a build button and I can use any of the standard functions that VBA provides. Or basically I can just say the validation rule has to be less than, for example, 100. So whatever value I enter here in ID has to be less than 100. Otherwise, I can put the validation text, which can be appeared within the message box if the validation rule fails on me. So I'm demonstrating all these things later on throughout the demonstration for you. Just wanted to show you different fields that are available, as well as the required field for validation at the table level. So I just wanted to demonstrate what do we mean by the table level validation. You could do many different things. In regard to the form level validation, you could specify validation options at the form level. You could basically specify every single section inside of the form itself by the time you're designing it. Let's go back to the form and right click here and go to the design view. And this is the form designer, and specify different information in it, like validating in many different areas, like allow data sheet view. Yes. So let's go and select the data sheet view. And as you see, it says the expression on load you entered as an event property setting produced the following error. The problem occurred while Microsoft Access was communicating with OLE Server ActiveX Control. Click OK. So basically, the form that I have is not coming from any data table right now. That's what they say, I can't read any information. So these are the validation that you can set, whether or not perhaps you want to allow edits, you want to perhaps go and specify a particular event procedure to be fired, or any other commands that you want to set throughout the form itself, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. And finally, the code level validation, that you can actually write the code for it. So let's first focus on the code level validation. That's the main center of attention in regard to course 1300. So let's talk about input mask once again. As you remembered, part of my demonstration, you could use the input mask property, and using the input mask, you could specify how a text box or a specific control could enter values in it. So please pay attention to this video, which is part of your CD.